Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to NCVO's training webinar on learning to lead in uncertain times. I'm Claire Ahrens, I'm the training coordinator here at NCVO, and I'm joined today by Edward Kellow, who is a course leader on our Charity Leadership in the 2020s programme and has worked in a range of different charities and a range of different sectors, working mainly on leadership. We're also joined today by Lauren Bernard, who is the webinar organiser. So welcome to you all. I hope you're not too cold and too freezing on this April afternoon. So what's going to happen today is Edward's going to give us a 30-minute presentation around leadership in the current climate. And then we have 15 minutes at the end to take your questions and answers. Please type your questions into the questions panel at any time throughout the presentation. That's at the bottom of your webinar dashboard. Thank you to those that have submitted already, and we'll try and get as many questions as we can. And then at the end, we'll ask you to complete a short follow-up survey when you're about to exit the webinar. So thank you very much. Sit back and enjoy.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Lauren. So for the next half hour, what I want to do is talk about some of the challenges as I see them for leaders in the charity sector. I want to share a model of sustainable leadership I developed in an organisation called LEAD with some other people, not just my ideas. And I want to get you thinking about the kind of skills and knowledge and attitudes that you might need to develop in the next 5, 10 years. Here's a quote that I like very much, and it tells you a lot about what I think about leadership. Leadership and learnership are indispensable to each other. So we're going to give you a few seconds to think about this one. Who is this quote attributed to? Was it John F. Kennedy? Was it John Lennon? Was it John Major? Or was it Jonathan Swift, those of you like Gulliver? Now have a think about that. Which of the Johns said this? Give you a few seconds to think about this one. Please do vote. Otherwise, we feel it's stupid. Do they know how to vote? Yeah. Go on, take a punt. Even if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Hey, interesting, very interesting. Well, it wasn't John Lennon, it wasn't John Lennon, and it wasn't John Major, and sadly it wasn't Jonathan Swift. It was John F. Kennedy. Yeah, correct, well done. So, I want to start with a positive model of leadership, and this is a guy called Donald Ainsley Henderson, who worked for the UN, and he and his team eradicated smallpox. What an amazing achievement, and I only heard about him when he died last year. Now, what I like about Donald Ainsley Henderson is that, first of all, he had a very small team, but he worked globally, and he had 200,000 people working for him in 50 different countries. What he was good at was working through other people, and he liked to get out of the field and ask them questions and see what they were doing. He was a brilliant communicator. Apparently he sent out regular reports, people knew what they were doing. He answered messages in 3 days. Now remember, this is before email. He was a tough negotiator. He insisted that the vaccines were of good quality. And he had to deal with all kinds of problems, like, you know, Ethiopian rebels attacking people who were doing the vaccinations, and trucks that couldn't get across the bridges in Bangladesh because they were too heavy. There's just a few problems to solve. And the last naturally occurring case of typhoid was in 1977. So I'm asking myself, you know, why isn't he better known? And also thinking we could learn from him. And what's really interesting about Ainsley is that Henderson is that he was given the job as a kind of poison chalice, that they didn't think he would succeed, but he did. And I really admire people like him, and he should be better known. So here's some of my beliefs, because I wanted to flag up. This is a health warning. You know, obviously I have my preferences and my prejudices. So what I'm going to say will be perhaps easy to understand if you know where I'm coming from. So I think that leadership is contextual. It depends on the situation. There's no silver bullet. You have to adapt. And leadership is about change. It's not about keeping things the same. And leadership is about learning, as that quote said. And I think there are many examples of learning all around us. I don't know if any of you listened to Radio 4, but this morning there was a fantastic program in the Life Scientific series with a guy called Donald McGregor. And he, as a scientist, and he led the campaign to reduce salt in our food to improve our diet. And it's a fascinating program. And he said that the three things you need are persistence, bloody-mindedness, and be charming. And I think that's very, very true. And I think learning to lead is about learning to be yourself. This is authentic leadership. So there are an awful lot of books about authentic leadership, but basically it's about getting people to trust you because they know who you are and you behave consistently. And I think the person I am on the camera, if you can see me, is pretty much the person I would be if you met me in the pub. That's what I try, that's what I aim for. Other things I believe are that it's better to ask questions than to know the answers. Asking the killer question, that's a really difficult thing to do. Why is this so? Why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it another way? And leadership is about empowering people. I love creating challenges for people. Some of my best managers gave me challenges and gave me opportunities. And that's the powerful thing about leadership. It's about creating people. That's our legacy. And there are many ways to lead, not just one. But there are some core skills and attitudes that I think work in a wide variety of situations, and I'm going to come on to that shortly. So, Steve Jobs, I don't know if any of you have read the biography. It's fascinating. It horrified me at the same time as it fascinated me. A great innovator. So he always wore black turtlenecks. Do you know where he got them from? Was it Issey-Miyake? Was it Gap? You kind of think so, wouldn't you? Or was it Uniqlo? Where do you think he got those famous turtlenecks? Please have a vote, and we'll see what you think. This is going to be fascinating. And I'll come on later to the question about why he always wore the same outfit. I expect some of you have Googled it already, but don't tell us till the end, please. How's the poll going? Oh, interesting. Now, yes, so Gap is the common sense answer, and that's kind of what I thought where he would get them. But no, and he didn't go to Uniqlo either. He went to Issey-Miyake, and he had hundreds of them. So there you are. Steve Jobs went around being, kind of, I was surprised when I found that. Okay, now, as we all know, there's been quite a lot of change in the world over the past year, probably more than has been ever in my lifetime. We had Brexit. We had the election of Donald Trump, and something I think that many of the columnists that I read are talking about is the power of social media to divide rather than unite. This is a quote that really struck me during the Brexit campaign. People in this country have had enough of experts. Oh, really? So what does this mean for you as leaders? Does this mean that the teams that you lead aren't going to follow your advice because, well, they know better, frankly? It's a very interesting situation where experts are not to be believed. So what does this mean for us as leaders in the future? Because now there are masses of information available on the internet, on websites, on blogs, on Twitter, and all the different sites you probably follow in huge quantities. And how do you choose which one to read? And anyway, the information can be faked, and there are some fantastic examples of fake news on YouTube. Also, during the Brexit discussion, I think feelings seem to emerge as being more important than fact. So people felt that they'd be better off, or some people felt they'd be better off if we left the EU. And the facts didn't matter. People said that some people trust their Facebook friends more than they trust traditional sources of information. So scientists, we don't believe them because climate change isn't happening, even though the scientists tell us it is. You'll hear that, you'll see that. And there's less respect for government, there's less respect for the media. And there are all kinds of reasons for that. But isn't it strange that when I go on holiday, I trust people on TripAdvisor more than I trust my friends? It's ridiculous. I don't know who they are, I don't know what their tastes are, and yet information on the internet somehow has more credibility. So how, as leaders, do you go about engaging and inspiring the many different stakeholders that you have in this post-factual world where things are a matter of opinion and it's about feelings and it's true if you think it's true? And I think I'm fascinated by the discussion about silos and bubbles and echo chambers. For those of you not on Twitter, this is about those of us who follow certain people and ignore other people. So we tend to get the same messages. And one of my favorite writers, and I recommend her to you, Gillian Tett, she's an anthropologist and she's the North American editor for the Financial Times. She takes an anthropologist lens to all kinds of issues like communications, cities, communities, and finance, obviously. And she says, if you're on Twitter, take a hard look at who you've chosen to follow. The likelihood is they all come from the same social intellectual tribe as you. And I think probably I'm guilty of that. Another quote that I saw from somebody who's actually an environmentalist, Adair Tobin. He's a former head of the Financial Services Authority. And he said, after Brexit, he said that he used to be an optimist, he used to be a rationalist, and he believed that people could be persuaded by argument. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But he's increasingly become to believe or realize that people need myths, mythologies, they need nationalisms, and they need religions. And you can see this happening all over the world. You can see it happening in Europe, you can see it happening in France now, you can see it happening in the UK. People need to believe in something, and so it becomes very important for you to create a vision of an organization and what you're achieving. So, thinking about the internet, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of information that I take in at the moment. So what do you think? How much more information do we take in now than we did in 1986? And this can be from press, from media, from Twitter, from Facebook. Is it 3 times more? Or is it 5 times more? Or is it 10 times more? What do you think? This is, for me, one of the big issues of the day. How much do you have to read to form an opinion, to feel confident that you actually are aware of the key facts? It's hard. So very interesting. Ha! I thought you might go for 10, and it feels like 10, and perhaps the research is out of date. It's actually, and it's not 3 times more. How fascinating. It's 5 times more than we did, but maybe that needs a bit more research. So thank you for voting. That's really interesting. Another quote from Tim Harford, who runs a program on Radio 4. He probably was on a Radio 4 listener. It's called Less is More. And he says this is about confirmation bias. So we tend to follow people we agree with. And I know I do this. If Claire says something that I agree with, I think, oh, Claire's really cool. She's a really intelligent person, and I respect her. It's just something I don't agree with. I'm not sure about Claire. And Tim Harford says, you know, I accepted bad news when it chimed, when it fitted my beliefs, and I dismissed the good news when it didn't. We all do this. Confirmation bias is something to watch out for. So, here's another quote that I really love. The trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure, they're overconfident, and the intelligent are full of doubt. I'm not sure I'm intelligent, but I'm full of doubt. So, who do you think said this? Was it Richard Branson? Was it Bertrand Russell, well-known philosopher? Was it Nicola Sturgeon, who is an incredible leader? Whatever you think of her methods and views, she is an outstanding leader. Yeah. Is it better to be full of doubt, or is it better to be confident? What do you think? Ooh, interesting. Well, there you are. Well, that just shows that we had a good guess. I'm afraid it's not Richard Branson, but it does sound like something he would say. And you're right, it's not Nicola Sturgeon. It's Bertrand Russell. Well done. That's interesting. Good, thank you. So, where does this leave me? So, about 10 years ago, I started a job with an international NGO that ran courses in leadership and sustainability. And it was very well resourced, and they had 6 wonderful courses in different skills, from negotiation skills to systems thinking, but they didn't actually have a leadership framework. And when I was new in the job, when I went to visit people to promote the program, they would say to me, and what is your model of leadership? And I was kind of biting my tongue and thinking, oh my God, we haven't got a model of leadership. And how has this organization survived for so long without one? So I began to explore, and pretty quickly I found some ideas that seemed to fit. One of them was an article called In Praise of the Incomplete Leader, and there's a link to this in the presentation, and you can download it for free. And one of the authors is Peter Senge, who is a well-known systems thinker, and he's gone into social enterprise, and he's seen the light, and he's very interested in sustainability, having been very much a corporate business person in the past. Now, this model, very simply, there's much more to it than this, but there are 4 key areas of skills for leaders. One of them is sense-making. How do we interpret the world? How do we deal with complexity? And as you probably realize, one of the things I'm thinking about a lot is the complexity and the weight of the information that we receive every day. How do you sift it? How do you decide what's important and what's useful? But sense-making is about being curious and asking questions, and it's about not going with your first idea. It's saying, well, you know, this is this and this is so, I'm trying to gradually make sense. Relating is about relationships, and it's about networking, and that's one of my biggest learnings, is that you need a network and you need to have good relationships, because it's through those relationships that you can achieve things. And you can have a good team and you can shift mountains. You can have the best plan in the world, but if you don't have good relationships, you won't get anywhere, I believe. Visioning, this is about knowing where you're going to go, and this is about creating a positive vision of the future that the Remain campaign signally failed to do. And inventing is about creativity, and if you read, as I do, a lot of articles about creativity and different ways of doing things, and you follow people like Elon Musk and Tesla cars, inventing is one of the biggest areas of interest in the future. Some people believe that technology will save the world and it will solve all the problems of climate change. I'm not sure that it will, but I still think that being creative and doing things differently is very important. So these areas were of great interest to me in terms of developing a leadership model. And I liked this. You'll see this fits with the quote from Bernard Shaw. They said that the incomplete leader has the confidence and the humility to recognize unique talents and perspectives throughout the organization. So this is about accepting that there will be other people in your organization who do actually know better than you, who are more skilled than you at doing things. And that's not something that you should be threatened by. It's something to welcome. And the leader's job is to help those people become even better at what they do. A leader doesn't have to have all the answers. So this is the model that I emerged from conversations I had with many different people, both within LEAD and in my organization and outside LEAD. And these are the skills that I think are essential if you're going to make a difference in the future world. This is changing so much. The first one I've talked about a bit already, but it's about knowing where you're going. And it's about creating narratives. And I find this very interesting because I'm also very interested in storytelling. So a leader tells people what the organization is for. What kind of organization are we? What kind of organization is the NCVO? And where is it going? And how are we going to do that? And one of the examples I remember is that Obama had a challenge of creating a narrative around the financial crisis, and there were different narratives. One was he was greedy financiers who lent money to people who couldn't afford to borrow it, and the other was that people were foolish and took out loans that they couldn't pay. Now, which was it? And a leader's job is to shape the narrative and give people a sense of going forward and having a destination and a goal. Now, listening and observing is incredibly important. And Peter Senge, when I went to a workshop that he was leading, said that listening is harder than deciding. And I totally agree with him. It's easier to make a decision, but it's much harder to hold your tongue and just listen to what everyone's doing in the room and process, which links in again with sensing. What's actually going on in the world right now? It's really complex. And I think there were points in the past year or so when I think even the journalists, they didn't really know what to say, they didn't know what to report, nobody knew what was going to happen next. So it's about being curious and asking why this is happening and what could be different. Self-awareness, this is something that I think it's very important for leaders. It's connected with authenticity. I remember seeing a CEO of an organization that I worked for come into the room with some photocopying. In the room were some of the brightest talents in the organization who really wanted to talk to him about the future. He walked from the door across to the photocopier. He didn't make eye contact with anybody. We were all watching him, but no, everyone was pretending they weren't. He photocopied his documents. He took them. He turned round. He walked out the room and didn't speak to anyone. And I can tell you that in the room, after he'd left, there was a kind of collective depression about Why? Why didn't he speak to us? Wasn't he interested to know what we were doing? All he had to do was stop by one or two desks and say, what are you doing today and how's it going? That would have been the behavior of a leader, but no. And so for self-awareness to me is about knowing what kind of impact you have when you walk in a room and how you engage with people. And it's something that I work on all the time. And I know I do certain things and I try to tone certain things down and build other things up, not always successfully. Being open to learning is absolutely key. And when I was running a leadership course and we were doing recruitment, we were having difficulties getting people with the profile that we needed, with the attitude to learning that we needed. A lot of people coming in the program who actually had all the answers, and there was no point in that. So we added in a question to the application form, which was, when did you last have a good learning experience, and why? So that's something maybe for you to think about after this webinar. When did you last have a good learning experience? Maybe today, I don't know. I hope so, some of you. And why? It's about being willing to recognize that we all have things to learn. I was running a leadership workshop for a well-known organization, and one of the managers came in. He was 35, and he said to me, I don't need to learn anything. In all seriousness. Incredible. Building relationships. I talked a bit about this already, but I honestly believe that the quality of your relationships and your networks matters far more than your plan, because if you have a good team, you can move mountains. Thinking and acting differently, that's the innovation thing. So if you always do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And I do believe that. And people always seem surprised that nothing changes if they act in the same way. We have to think about other ways of doing things, otherwise we will not survive. And organizations that can think their way out of situations will be the ones that will survive. This is the concept of the learning organization, which I haven't got time to talk about now, but I do believe that leaders are there to encourage their staff to think differently. Advocacy and influencing is something I discovered in about the last 5 or 6 years, and I hadn't realized just how important it is. And advocacy is not about telling people what to do, and it's not about telling them your opinion. It's about listening. And you have to listen to people to hear their version of what's going on, to understand what it's like to be in their shoes. Then you can start to share some ideas, and what if we did this, and what if we did that. And advocacy is the soft power, it's the soft skill that leaders can use to create change, to build coalitions, to get people thinking differently, to get people to move forward. The final skill is a hard one. It's about persistence. And I got this actually from one of my colleagues. She was much tougher than I am, much more persistent than I am, although I am persistent. And it seemed to jar a bit with all my sort of nice, soft sensing, listening, and thinking and observing ones. But actually, she was dead right. You have to persist. And as I said, Don McGregor this morning said, persistence is one of the three most important things for leaders. Now, out of all this, I came up with some messages, and here are 2 slides I had included in a presentation I made at a course in Oxford. And after the course, a guy came up to me and said to me, I really enjoyed your presentation. And I thought, thank you very much. And he said, but those 2 last slides were the best. And I thought, oh, wow, so maybe the others weren't very good. So these are the nuggets that this guy really liked. And I think that good leaders do want to make a difference. It's not about what's good for your career, which I see examples of that all the time. It's people genuinely wanting to change the world and making life better for everybody. Good leaders look ahead, they scan the horizon, they look at trends, they look for opportunities. They haven't got their nose to the grindstone. Good leaders are curious, they ask questions, and they listen to people, they ask people's opinion, and they genuinely want to know the answer. And good leaders challenge themselves. They're open to doubt. They're able to say, actually, I don't know the answer to this question. And that takes courage. Other leaders do all the opposite. They don't ask questions. They do what they've always done. They do what's good for them. And you want to keep them clear. This is the second slide that the guy liked. So good leaders explore options. They suspend judgment. This is the sensing behavior. And they look at lots of ideas before they actually decide. And they take responsibility for decisions. They don't blame other people when things go wrong. Good leaders collaborate. I think this is so key, and I don't see a lot of it. I see lots of superficial partnerships, but I don't see a lot of people working together genuinely. And Well, one of the reasons I'm enjoying working with Claire and Lauren is that this is a collaboration with NCVO, and we can achieve more together. Good leaders encourage dialogue. Good leaders value diversity. They seek out different opinions. And good leaders invest in their team and create a legacy. You know, if there's one thing, I don't see myself as a hugely successful leader. I'm better at facilitating and training and coaching. But if I've achieved something, I think there are some people out there in the world who learned something from me, and I hope they're putting some things into practice. And not everything I share will work for them, but it's about choosing what you want and applying it. And the opposite is true of the other leaders. They see their team as competition. They speak from a higher level because they know what to do, and they reject all ideas that don't fit with their notions of the world. Now, this has worked for me. I'm a volunteer in a garden in London. And when I started, it was very difficult to actually even join. I had to be persistent because they told me that they wanted a 2-year commitment. And I said, well, I can't give you a 2-year commitment. You know, I have no idea what I'll be doing in 2 years' time. But eventually I got an email from the head gardener, and he said, come in and have a chat. He said, I don't worry so much about this. And he said, he showed me a flower bed, and he said, tell me the names of 5 weeds in this bed. Well, it wasn't that difficult because there were plenty of them. But they took me on. And I was persistent. I went in every week. I was on my knees in mud, digging out nettles and brambles and ivy from the beds in the freezing winter. I listened. I built relationships with the gardeners. I went out of my way not to seem as if I had the answers, because I didn't, because I don't have any horticultural qualifications whatsoever. I shared my enjoyment. I shared knowledge with them. And I built relationships, and this goes back to my central thing. I now have a number of key relationships, and people have commented on the change that's happened in this garden. That people are far more open, and they're far more enthusiastic, and they're far more committed to what they were doing. And it's really just because, well, one of the reasons is that I came in and began asking questions and saying, why are we doing this and why are we doing that? And I did everything that everybody else did. Which I think is another thing that leaders do. Leaders have to be willing to turn their hand to doing everything. So, coming back finally to the Steve Jobs question, why did Steve Jobs always wear the same outfit? I bet some of you already know and have Googled this. It's about decision fatigue. About 2 or 3 years ago, I became aware that in the morning I was spending, up to an hour and a half answering emails. And by the end of that, I was exhausted, frankly, and I didn't have much appetite for work. Lots of neuroscientists have done research, but Daniel Levitin wrote a very interesting book called Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload. He says that it's best to tackle the most important or the most challenging tasks in the morning when we're fresh and when we haven't burnt up energy. And the theory is that if you have lots of little tasks to do in the morning, by the time you've finished answering 30 emails, you're going to be quite tired and you won't perform best. So Steve Jobs wore the same thing every day because he just wanted to pull something out of the drawer and get to work. So finally, I love this quote from Steve Jobs. This is what they called his reality distortion field, which he got from Star Trek's. And he used to say to his staff, don't be afraid. And he was always pushing them to do things more, do more than they thought they could achieve. I think sometimes he overstepped the mark from reading his biography, but I think this is a great technique for leaders. If you can exude confidence, if you can show that you believe that things are going to happen, and despite all the cuts and the pressures and the difficulties that charity workers face, if you can look confident and happy to be there and engaged, then people will buy into that and they will follow you. And I've seen that for real. And my last quote here is, again, I like getting quotes from different sources. So this is Larry Harvey, who co-founded the Burning Man Festival in Nevada. I've never been, I don't know whether any of you have, but this is where they go into the desert and they live I don't know, like
Free spirits.
Free spirits. Thank you, Claire. And they have a Burning Man, and when they've gone, they tidy everything up. They leave no trace. He says that progress comes from hard struggle, hard work, shared with others towards a common goal. And I do believe this. It's about having a common goal. It's about working with others. It's about genuine collaboration, and it's about working hard. And that's when teams change. Teams become successful when they achieve things together. And I've just done a very short reading this for you. There's the article about Donald, actually it's D.A. Henderson, there's a typo there. The Positive Deviant is a very good book on leadership by Sarah Parkin, who co-founded Forum for the Future. What I like about this book is it's very personal, but also she has a summary of different leadership models and techniques which you can read more about. And I thoroughly recommend a book called The Self Factor by Duncan Coppock. He was my external coach when I was doing a coaching qualification, and it's about supporting yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, how can you look after other people? You have to find a way to balance your work, and you have to be nice to yourself too. So there.
Okay, we're going to take some questions now. So the first one.
Yeah, Di, I'm sure a lot of people, Di's asking, how do you maintain staff morale when more is being asked of everyone and budgets are being squeezed and everyone feels under pressure? And if you've lost staff morale, how do you get it back? Well, just a small challenge there. Well, for me, this goes back to being happy in yourself, looking after yourself and being a confident leader. It's about the listening. But it's not about buying into misery stories. And I think sometimes in organisations you can get a very negative script about poor us and we don't have this, we don't have that. You cannot afford to buy into that. One of the best leaders I ever saw was head of an animal welfare charity, and she exuded warmth, interest, concern, and people loved her, and they would have done anything for her. So I think it's about maintaining your equilibrium and not being, however you're feeling inside, you can't let it show. That's my best go at that one. Oh no, very similar. How to lead effective negativity, response, despair. Hey, lots of bad news, little to inspire people. That's a very hard one. I think again it's about your team, and I think it's about setting boundaries, actually. I think it's okay to have, you know, maybe at the start of meetings you could have a sort of, I'm trying to think of the word, help me, Claire, but the word where people just sort of, you know, people just say what's upsetting them, and you have a moan, and then you stop, and you move
Draw
on.
the line.
Draw the line and say, okay, that's enough. We all know it's difficult. Let's move on. And I think actually, Matt, this would be really subversive, that I think if I was in an organisation where that was continuing, it can be very bad for you, and there's a kind of point where you have to decide, is this organisation going anywhere? Can I make a difference? And if you can't, get out. Frankly, get out. And one of the things, I've stayed in organisations too long in my career, I think, and I should have got out of a few. I stayed too long. So my tip, get out before it gets you down too bad. But fight for a while. Ben, tips of these how leaders can create space and structure for very nice. So he's talking. Ben's asking about how leaders can create space and structure for constructive organizational reflection. Right, lovely question. If you have meetings, Ben, I used to encourage people before a meeting just to spend some time talking about what's been happening to them. I asked them about the positive things that are happening to them. It's a bit manipulative, I know. And I used to create space at the end of meetings where we talk about how the meeting went. And so I think it's about adding things to other events that you've got, making a little bit of space for that kind of discussion. And there are lots of other things you can do. You can have brown bag lunches where you invite people to a lunch, and you get one member of staff to talk about what they're doing. People bring their lunch, and you spend an hour together. And there's learning and there's lunch, and it's very informal. And of course, team building days do fill me with horror sometimes, and you know, taking people off site is probably a very good thing. I do think you should do it every year. Get yourself a facilitator, because you can't be a prophet in your own organization, and have fun. On your away day, it's really important to do something new and different together and to be inspired. So yeah, there's some ideas for you. Lee, how can you be authentic and not something to hide what you really feel? Good question. Well, I remember a comedian who said, if you can crack authenticity, you've got it won. And yes, there is an element of putting on a front. And yes, When I give a talk, and often I give talks to conferences and courses, I may be feeling rubbish inside for whatever reason, but I have learned to be positive and to engage with people. I think this is about Stoicism. I don't know whether any Stoics in the group, but the Stoics said that you cannot choose what affects you, but you can choose your reaction to it. And I think that's really important. So you can say, oh, isn't this awful? Isn't this terrible? Poor us. Or you can say, well, actually, it is awful, and we're going to do something about it. So yes, I agree with the question. I think I understand where you're coming from. You have to put on a bit of front sometimes. Simon, how do you manage not to turn negative? Oh my! Get a coach. That's very difficult. I've been there. I think what I would do, I'm speculating here, I don't know anything about your situation, but can you form a network of like-minded people in your organization? Can you have a group of people who think like you? And maybe you should be looking for another job. So, got a question here about what skills from the leadership model are most important. That's a really hard one. If I had to pick three, I definitely pick listening and observing, because you can learn more about an organization, a community, by just listening and observing what's going on. Relationships are absolutely key. As I said before, if you've got good relationships, then you can get stuff done. And I think it's the persistence, the one that I didn't think of originally. You have to persist. There's a story in Scotland. I don't know where you probably all know it. I don't know if there are any Scots on the webinar, but it's about Robert the Bruce in the cave, and he saw a spider spinning a web, and it kept falling down, and it couldn't succeed. And apparently, eventually, after many attempts, it did succeed. And the story is that Robert Bruce thought, well, if the spider can do that, then I can go back and I'll beat the English. I'm sorry, I'm Scottish. And he did. So that's the story that all Scots should get told at school about persistence. Well, my favourite leadership quote. I've got lots, but one that came out recently, when we're actually running a course here, we had a speaker called Nick Wilkie, who was a really inspirational speaker. And he said he'd been on a program with a Major General, Michael Guthrie, and Charles Guthrie, sorry, who was the most senior person in the British Army. And it may surprise you, I'm quoting from someone from the military, I don't know. But anyway, someone asked him what was a good leader, and he said that you had to be clear about your goal. You had to recruit the right team. So obviously, if you've been listening to what I've been saying, you'll know that I'm thinking, yes, goal, be a goal, get the right team. And then he said, love them a lot. And I think that's fantastic. And it is about loving people. It is about letting them know that you unconditionally support them. I remember in a meeting there was an intern giving a presentation, and she was saying, giving a presentation about a copyright, and she suddenly said in front of everybody, and the head of the director was there, she said, I'm not feeling very confident. So what I did was I got up and I sat down next to her and I touched her on the shoulder. I didn't say anything, and she said, thank you, Edward, and she carried on with the presentation, and she did it beautifully. Now, what I take from that is that she knew that I believed in her, and she knew that I was there to support her, and I showed her love. So show your staff love and see the results. Oh, I know. So Ben, regarding authenticity as a leader, don't you also need sometimes to provide one? Yes, you do, Ben. I totally agree. I had a very wonderful colleague once who wanted to learn to be a trainer. He's a much better trainer than I was actually, and he wanted to run a trainer course. And on the day he was about to run it, he said to me, "I can't do this," and I said, "You will run it, because I want you to run it." And that went totally against my character. I find it really hard to do, but he did run it, and he succeeded. And he sent me an email just the other month saying, "Thank you for working with Mimi and what he learned, and that touched me, more than anything. So sometimes you do have to step out of your comfort zone and behave in ways that don't come naturally, I'm afraid. One more. So Emma, as a young female, I feel I have to work hard to gain people's respect as a leader. Is this common? Do you have any tips on overcoming this? Well, I'm a guy, but I'm a gay man, and I think there's some territory in common here. Yes, I'm sure you do, and it depends on the environment in the office. What can I say about this? Emma, be good at what you do. Just make sure that you know what you're talking about. Always do what you say you're going to do, and you'll get respect. That's a bit basic, but I honestly think just concentrate, be professional, and people will trust you. It's about getting people's trust. That's the thing, I think.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Lauren.
So, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that this afternoon. I hope it's not too cold or snowing wherever you are. Thank you for those questions. There were some real personal insights into them, and good luck with your leadership and with your inspiration. The question about managing up and will it be seen, this webinar is recorded. You might want to pass it around your organisation, pass it up to people. Then perhaps they can read it at their leisure. There's going to be a short survey at the end when you exit this webinar. We will also be emailing all of you details of some of the books and the websites that Edward's mentioned, and also about the course that Edward leads that starts in a couple of months on the 18th of June, Charity Leadership in the 2020s. So looking at what it really means to lead in the next decade, which when we came up with the title always seemed ages away, and suddenly you realise it's only perhaps 3 years away, which is going very quickly and quite scary. But thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for your questions. Any questions that you may have for myself or for Edward that I can pass on, please email us at training@ncbo.org.uk, and have a great rest of afternoon. Thank you very much.